control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I'm covering The Outer Limits, Season 1, Episode 9, entitled Corpus Earthling. This one was directed by Gerd Oswald and story by Louis Charbonneau. It was based on a book by Louis Charbonneau, I believe. Let me just check this. Yes, written in 1960, which is a similar elements to some of the story, but I have changed it around. In this one, there's some interesting stuff going on. This one stars Robert Culp. Now, Robert Culp has already been in an episode of The Outer Limits, The Architects of Fear, rather a fine episode. And it's apparently he appeared in 3 of the original series, and this was his least favourite. Now, okay, fair enough. This is a pretty good episode, and I have to say the other 2 are pretty excellent episodes too. So. And I would say this is probably the 3rd best of the 3, but that's not to say this is a weak episode, because it isn't. It's rather fine. And it's got some interesting elements throughout. Now, this one aired, to give it a historical context, this one aired originally on November the 18th, 1963, which was 4 days before JFK got shot. That gives it a bit of context. And it deals with some interesting elements. And I have to say, when I read the synopsis, I couldn't remember this episode, even though I've seen them all. And when I read the synopsis, I thought, does not sound good. The synopsis is, basically, there's a geology lab, and a surgeon who happens to have a steel plate in his head from a war injury can hear the rocks talking, and it appears they are actually aliens plotting, and they come to realise that he can hear them, and they call him quite ominously the listener. So all they ever call him is the listener from that point on, and there's some shenanigans around that. Doesn't sound like a great plot synopsis, but actually pretty well delivered story. I'd say about as best as they could do for given the story. So the lab is run by a man called Dr. Temple, and Culp's character, is a physician called Dr. Paul Cameron, starts hearing these things and thinks there's something wrong with him. Then he realises, once they realise he's a threat, they kind of try to mesmerise him to jump out of a window, but he's saved by his wife, Laurie, who's Dr. Temple's assistant. That's the connection. That's why he's there. And his wife, by sort of breaking this, his concentration, breaks this control. However, he's not convinced they are aliens. He thinks he might be going mad, and he decides he wants to go on a vacation. He asks his wife to go along, and they go. Now, the rocks then take control of Dr. Temple, who starts to pursue them, and all sorts of things happen. There's a lonely cabin, and stuff happens. His wife gets possessed at one point, and when they get possessed, they kind of look different. Interestingly, I would like to say Dr. Temple is played by an actor called Barry Atwater, who's well known in TV circles for a couple of reasons. Probably the most famous is he played the vampire in the Kolchak movie The Night Stalker. The vampire Skorzeny. He's a big, physically tall person. He's quite imposing, and he played that vampire, so he's famous for that. But he was also quite famous for being in an episode of Star Trek where he plays the progenitor of the Vulcan philosophies, and it's called an episode called The Savage Curtain. His character's name is Surak, so he's kind of famous for those two things, but he was also famous. Now, they made him up to look very gaunt when he was possessed by the rocks, very gaunt, drawn, quite. His features, angular features, were really. They did apply makeup to really make them more angular, and his hair was kind of brushed up to make almost like standing on end, so he looked quite odd, while still being the same person. And he evoked in me quite a lot of... There's a film called Carnival of Souls where there's this weird sort of dude who kind of lingers around the set. He's got a white face with kind of black around the eyes. So he looks like a bit zombie-ish, but he's not a zombie. He's a ghost or something. Anyway, the makeup in this... looked quite a lot like that. Now, Carnival of Souls came out in 1962, but I'm not sure it was that well regarded when it came out. I'm not sure. So it could be it was an influence on this, or it could be similar, they're just similar, or it might be someone saw the makeup and thought it was striking and used it in this. I don't know. Who knows with these kind of things? But Carnival of Souls, that character is played by Herc Harvey, who was the director, actually, as well, of that movie. So I saw that in it. So I thought this was quite effective. It was creepy. It was tense. It really went for it. It was melodramatic, but went for it in a good way. It wasn't silly. It was kind of had a heavy mood. So I like this one. I'd recommend it. And as I say, I had seen it before, but I just couldn't remember it. And it sounded like it's going to be goofy, but they played it pretty straight and it worked, and Robert Culp's pretty good at it, so no complaints about this one. It was rather good and a recommended one. I don't want to spoil the end, so I won't talk about this anymore, the plot anymore. So yeah, try and catch this one. As I say, season 1 episode 9, rather good and recommended episode. Okay, so bye from me, and may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to